Good evening, everybody. Hello, Megan Taslam in Thyroid Healthy Balance. Welcome, and a very warm welcome to all the new members in Thyroid Healthy Balance. So tonight's live is very, very important, and often we we kind of downplay the long-term effects of thyroid dysfunction, and also the potential root causes of thyroid dysfunction. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is the link between thyroid health and your bone health. Yeah, because we have receptors in pretty much every single system, every organ in the body, including our bones. So our metabolic health and whether we are metabolizing at a fast rate or a slow rate, hence governed by our thyroid gland, is actually going to have a direct influence on our bone health. But is it as simple as that? Well, actually, no, it's very, very complex, because our important minerals for our bone, which you're probably thinking of as calcium, is incredibly important. However, it also plays a very key role to the functioning of our endocrine glands. So then you could think, well, what has come first? And it becomes a chicken egg scenario. Because if you have insufficient minerals in your body, especially when you're going through, say, perimenopause or menopause, and there's a drop of estrogen, which is actually influencing your bone health as well, not the cause. We don't have estrogen deficiency. It's a natural pathway to wisdomhood. It naturally occurs, between premenopause and postmenopause. However, if that will potentially be a catalyst to a drop in calcium, which could then trigger thyroid dysfunction. All right, I'm just highlighting one common pathway, but it's not the only pathway. Because calcium, which is one of the most abundant minerals in the body, so it is for our structure, for our skeletal structure, and I'm going to go through all the other functions of calcium as well. It is literally the backbone to so many other things that are going on in our body. Hey, Linda, lovely to see you. Hey, Deb, awesome, fantastic, warm welcome. It's literally the backbone, pardon the pun, it literally is the backbone to so many functions in the body, including the secretion of our thyroid hormones. Yeah. So it's interesting. Our thyroid hormones are required and actually influence our bone health. And it's not only hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism, it's both. And I'm going to go through that with you. So just to be clear, whether you have low functioning thyroid or high functioning thyroid, both scenarios can negatively influence your bone health. So therefore you think, well, I'm losing out anyway. Not necessarily, because there's a lot more to the picture than calcium alone. All right. And this is where I'm actually very, very grateful to be working in this field, because, with naturopathy, we don't just look at, it's not just a lock and key. We don't just look at that one area that's, obviously well known to support bone health, as an example. We look at all the other links, everything else that is going on, because it's like a domino effect. And, if you could have too much calcium and have brittle bones, and that is a fact, which is super interesting, because why is it so that brittle bone disease, or osteoporosis / osteopenia, so just to be clear, osteopenia is like pre-osteoporosis, so that's when the bones are starting to get a little bit soft, whereas osteoporosis is, when the bone mineral density has decreased at such a rate that there's a high risk of fracture. All right, that's the difference, right? And then osteoarthritis is different altogether. That's inflammation of the cartilage, glucosamine, chondroitin, and all those key components that make up cartilage. All right, so I just wanted to get those definitions out there. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. But yes, just getting back to it, you can have too much calcium and have an issue with your bone health, and too little calcium and an issue with your bone health. All right. Therefore, it's really important to understand what else is going on with your minerals. All right. Because they all play a role. Okay. So I'm just going to, before I get into it, I just wanted to cover some key points. What we're going to cover tonight. Okay. We're going to cover the hidden connection between thyroid and bone density. All right. We're going to cover that calcium alone and vitamin D is not the answer if you have low bone mineral density. It is not the answer. It may be absolutely indicated, but it actually depends on your metabolic type, and I'm going to go through that. I'm also going to be talking about holistic strategies and looking at the root cause so that you can ascertain whether it is a chicken, the chicken or egg scenario, and what came first, so that you can really get to the bottom of what's actually going on with your bone health, right? Okay, so I've got my notes here, excuse me. I've got a lot to cover. Okay, so firstly, just to cover a few basics. So calcium is required and makes up 90% of our skeleton, our structure. It's a structural support system. It's very dynamic, meaning that it doesn't just stay fixed. So our body is always pulling on the reservoir of calcium and other minerals like phosphorus, magnesium, zinc, copper, etc. within our bone, so that it actually can perform the functions required by our hormones and other organs and systems in the body. All right. So even though our skeletal structure is incredibly important, the body's triage system says that it's not as important as your beating heart, for very good reason. All right. And interestingly, calcium is really important to help lower blood pressure. All right. So people with high amounts of calcium may have low blood pressure. People with low amounts of calcium may tend to have high blood pressure. Okay, so it's just really interesting to see all the correlations. Okay, so other areas, within the bone, as I mentioned, phosphorus and other minerals. All right, so calcium obviously is required for muscle contractions, namely the heart and the cardiovascular system. It's a second messenger for our hormones. So, for example, just going to another part of the body, insulin from excuse me. Okay, insulin will not be secreted without the action of calcium. Like, it's impossible, right? So low levels of calcium in the body may also influence the disease process of type 2 diabetes, right? The other thing is estrogen. Estrogen requires calcium to help with those hormonal changes, okay? And calcium is required for the release of thyroid hormone. So you can see that, our body is going to pull on the reservoir of calcium from bone so that it can actually do the jobs that it needs to do. It's really, really important. So it's no surprise then that our main reservoir of calcium is not, which is 90%, actually makes up the bone. So you can then see that with, just generally speaking, our dietary and lifestyle elements within the Western world, like stress, and stress is a huge one actually, because that impacts adrenal and thyroid function, which actually will mean that our body is requiring more calcium to help modulate and rectify any overactivity or underactivity of those particular endocrine functions. Yeah, so you can imagine, it's not just a matter of eating foods rich in calcium. And in fact, there's a study that's been shown that in Western civilizations that actually consume more dairy products are actually have higher rates of osteoporosis. I find that really, really interesting. So it's not just about adding more in, because as I mentioned in the very beginning, too much calcium as well as too little calcium can be a problem. All right. So let me just check that I've covered everything I wanted to cover with calcium before I move on. Okay, it controls cell division and differentiation. Okay, cell division. So from the pluripotent stem cells within the medulla of the bone, where our bone marrow is, that's where that's the beginnings of cell division, right? It controls normal blood clotting, acid alkaline balance. So calcium is an alkalizing mineral. So if our body tissue or our tissues are too acidic, or another way of putting it, we've got some chronic inflammation, our body will then pull on calcium to help balance the pH of that. And if you're coming in on this live, just let me know that you're here, say hello. And of course, if you're coming in on the replay, just do a hashtag replay and certainly ask any questions along the way. All right, so I think I've answered everything else. So our demands of our calcium, like our body actually requires 800 milligrams per day from varied sources as a dietary component. All right. And obviously that goes up with different demands in the body, such as pregnancy, etc. Okay, so it is regulated by vitamin D, calcitonin parathyroid hormone, which is in the parathyroid, and it's a very, very complex network. And depending on what's going on with your thyroid and adrenals will depend on the rate of absorption of calcium from the parathyroid elements. Okay, so super interesting. So for example, overactive adrenals, like adrenal exhaustion, stress, chronic stress causing impact on your adrenals, which then cascades and causes impact on your thyroid, will actually create calcium loss in the body as a whole. All right. So then the body's got to scramble to try and figure out how to get it, right? So it's going to draw from bone as much as it can, and, to actually carry out the metabolic activity that's required to keep our endocrine system in balance. So if you can imagine, it should not be then a shock that, for a thyroid issue to manifest, it can take decades. It can take 10, 20 years. And then it's also no surprise that these types of issues with thyroid generally become apparent around those times of like menopause or, pregnancy, postmenopausal, perimenopausal, when there's an increased demand of many things in the body, including calcium to help the regulation of those hormones. All right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is why it's not as simple as just popping a calcium pill and vitamin D supplement, right? Because if you don't really know what's going on in your body and you're lacking understanding on the minerals and whether you have heavy metals or anything like that, you could actually be doing your body a disservice by taking calcium. Because if you have low bone mineral density, the only time you will require calcium is if your metabolic type demands it. So if your body is actually requiring calcium, okay, because it might be other minerals, it might be phosphorus, it might be zinc, copper, magnesium, other components to actually regulate and help your thyroid do its job and actually interact with the bone remodeling, right? Because as I mentioned, we have thyroid receptors on the bone. So I'm trying not to get too complicated. If it's getting complicated, please let me know. I can always write a blog, a blog to kind of like further explain this process. But our body works in, like, it's really interesting. Like often, like what's that saying? It robs Peter to pay Paul. Like the body's doing that all the time, and it's because it's trying to maintain the homeostasis and the cohesion in our body so that everything is balanced. All right. So if, for example, another issue is if we don't have great absorption, so we have a digestive issue, we have a chronic digestive problem, and we're not absorbing our minerals, over time, that's going to create an impact on our bone health and our thyroid, potentially from the same reason, which is not enough calcium. Now, I'm not saying that this is the be all or end all. I'm just simply providing this opportunity for further understanding and education around some key components for thyroid health. And it's not just about everything else that I've spoken about. There are so many elements to consider, which is why a thorough analysis and understanding of what's going on in your body is critical. It's actually really important because otherwise you may be looking in the wrong area. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get into this now, which is why it's important to understand your metabolic type. All right. So there is evidence, a lot of evidence to show that hyperthyroidism actually there's a higher rate and incidence of fractures and osteoporosis with those who have hyperthyroid. All right. However, and that's a fast metabolic type, by the way. All right. Now, what happens is with a high metabolic rate, the loss of calcium is in the cortex of the bone, which is in the outer section of the bone. All right, so the outer section of the bone is unable to strengthen and remain hard, which actually predisposes you to fractures and breaks from, not having a hard surface area of the bone. Whereas the slow metabolic type or hypothyroidism, all right, or, you may not even actually have a diagnosis of hypothyroid. You may just have a slow metabolism and it's kind of heading that way, but it's not actually hypothyroid. But a slow metabolic type will actually cause an interaction with the receptors in the bone in the medulla, which is actually the central portion of the bone. So you could still actually get osteoporosis with hypothyroidism because of a softening of the inner part of the bone, right? So both are very different. It's different aspects of the bone, okay? And then we need to consider all the antagonists and agonists. So what's actually preventing your body from absorbing calcium into the bone? So are there, like as I mentioned, heavy metals? So two typical antagonists. So an antagonist is something that's actually latching on and preventing, your body from actually absorbing the calcium, or absorbing the calcium into the bone, I should say. And those two are lead and cadmium, okay, which often show up when we do our functional testing. Not always, not everyone has that level of toxicity. It just depends on many other, symptoms or many other things that are going on in your body. Some people just don't actually break down and remove heavy metals as well as other people, which is why we actually really need to look at how it's getting in there, the source, and also, what's going on with the liver and why the body's actually not able to pull that out and actually, get rid of that safely. All right, because any heavy metal, any level of heavy metal is going to cause an impact. There's no such thing as a, correct range for heavy metals in the body. And unfortunately, I'm just seeing it more and more often. Not just heavy metals, but other elements as well. Things like tin and zirconium and titanium and lots of other different types of metals that are just showing up. And this is just what we're up against. This is what's happening. And it's because of all of these elements being in our products that we consume, in our waterways, in the fertilizers, and in the soils, and then they migrate to the food. So we've just got to do what we can. And environmental health is so incredibly important. And just highlighting one area is the antagonism to a very, very important mineral such as calcium. So you can see that, like you could be taking all the calcium under the sun and actually not getting any improvement with your bone mineral density. And I'm sure you will know a family member or a friend or someone who's of that older demographic that they're taking their calcium, but it's not actually really making a difference, because it's not just about the calcium, it's about many other things, and they could actually be doing the wrong thing. Because one thing I forgot to mention, with the slow metabolic type, meaning like hypothyroid tendency, because of the inability to actually absorb the calcium properly into the bone, what can often happen with that particular type is calcium is actually deposited in other tissues within the body. So you may have heard of kidney stones, and different calcium deposits which cause issues in other organs. So that's where, it's pretty common knowledge that if you're taking a calcium supplement, especially a very poor form of calcium, and if you happen to have the metabolic type that doesn't actually require that, in fact, your metabolic type is highlighting that you're requiring other minerals to help calcium along the way, as opposed to calcium per se, well, then you could actually be, your body is just trying to do its job, and it's trying to, provide that homeostasis, and, your body's on your side, and it's actually trying to correct the issue by removing the calcium, and it kind of can turn up in other areas of the body, right? Such as, like, the main one is kidney stones. All right, so here's the thing. You don't know until you know. And how do we actually find out what's going on in our body? Well, I've been going on about this, and I'm a big fan of functional testing, because it just gives that really, really great snapshot of what's actually going on in your body. It's not a problem solver. It's actually information. It's information that is otherwise unseen in your body, because a bone mineral density test that will show you if your bones are, have a low bone mineral density, as an example. And typically, because calcium resides in the bone at 90%, as well as phosphorus. Sorry, 90% of calcium is in the bone, excuse me. But one of the major minerals in the body is actually phosphorus. And that actually makes up a huge component of bone as well as many other cofactor minerals, like, as I mentioned before, copper, zinc, magnesium, etc. All right, so if if our ratios are out of balance, or we've got heavy metals, or we don't really know what's going on, the only way to find out is to actually do, some functional testing, which is really, really simple. It's quite easy, this particular one, and it just gives you some understanding, and it actually will highlight some tendencies in your body as well. Like, tendencies is in, like, if you might be prone to hypertension, or stress, or depression, or any other things that are going on in your body. Because our minerals are, as I mentioned, are the backbone, and our vitamins are the cofactors. So what has come first? Has it been a deficiency in calcium that has actually predisposed the issues with your thyroid gland? It could be. It could be part of the puzzle. All right? Absolutely. So the only way to find out is to have a thorough understanding of what's actually going on in your body, because it's not only about diet. And we need to also ascertain the impact of external stresses on these very important endocrine glands, such as your adrenals and your thyroid, because stress is catabolic. It actually breaks down, the stress hormones will break down tissue. All right. So an over-revved and chronic long-term stress can be extremely detrimental to your adrenal glands and your thyroid hormones and your thyroid gland as well as your gut health. We know that stress actually causes intestinal permeability. We know that stress actually lowers the impact of estrogen. We know that, a drop in estrogen will actually circuit break the thyroid hormones, T4 to T3 conversion, as an example. We know all of this, but, so it requires a holistic approach. If it was as simple as just taking a calcium and vitamin D supplement, which I'm pretty sure you understand now that it's not, well, then there wouldn't be an epidemic of osteoporosis in the world. It would be very, very simple. But the fact of the matter is, and the statistics show that it is on the increase, because it requires a multifactorial approach to wellness. Looking at your diet, looking at your lifestyle, looking at the balance of minerals in your body, looking at the impact of stress on your body, whether you have a digestive issue, the level at which your thyroid hormones have been behaving badly, are they swinging? I often see that the TSH is sky high and then it's really, really low, because your thyroid hormone, the TSH, just zooming in on this now, the thyroid stimulating hormone, it is actually designed to whip your thyroid. Like if your thyroid hormones are the horse, the TSH is the whip. It's designed to actually whip it into gear so it will produce more hormone, or stop whipping it so that there won't be any hormone produced, right? So it's always trying to bring balance back to your metabolic health. And it can only do so much with what it's got to work with. And if there's an inadequacy of minerals and vitamins, well, then how can it actually do the job? How can it do the job? So that leads me to the next point. Holistic strategies. This is actually what's required. That's evidence-based, and also looking at your specific individual health picture based on what's going on in your body, whether you're a fast metabolizer, whether you're a slow metabolizer, and whether that has manifested into a thyroid issue or not. Because if it hasn't, well, guess what? That is brilliant, because we can actually make amends before it does, if it were to. All right. So it's really, and you can actually change your metabolic type. From fast, you can actually change it. So if it's too fast, you can slow it down by addressing the mineral ratios and imbalances. So how cool is that, right? Now, it may not be as easy as supplementation, because of course we need to look at all the holes in the bucket. We need to do our due diligence in understanding what's actually going on in your body, where the increased demands are, and whether there are any leaks. Leaks meaning, like poor absorption, poor integrity of your mucous membrane, or impact of stress that's actually breaking down your tissue as well. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to also, I forgot to mention this. Here are some other symptoms caused by low tissue calcium. Okay. So anxiety, hypersensitivity is one. Obviously your metabolic rate, which is what I mentioned a moment ago. Your cardiovascular system is impacted. Irritability allergies, I mentioned blood pressure, yeah, cardiovascular system, insomnia, so inability to fall asleep. So if you have insomnia, and there's many different types of insomnia. There's sleep onset and offset. So sleep onset is your inability to fall asleep. That could be because of low tissue calcium. Now, it may not be. So please, if you can't fall asleep, and if you've got insomnia, please don't go out and buy some calcium, because it may not be the cause for you. It just that there is a link there, and that would need to be ascertained. Yeah. And also muscle cramps. So often with muscle cramps, we go for magnesium. But if the muscle cramp is the type of cramp where, you can't touch it, like it's so painful, you just need to like hold the area and just wait for it to pass, that typically is a calcium deficiency. Now, not necessarily, obviously we need to check, but that is a symptom of calcium deficiency. However, if your muscle cramp is the type of cramp, like I'm thinking the calf, that's where often we get muscle cramps. If your muscle cramp is the type of cramp where you really need to rub it, you need to rub the cramp out, and you're going to need to get up and move, that typically is a magnesium deficiency or insufficiency. So these are just some little key signs and symptoms. So you might want to, if you do tend to get cramps, just feel into like what it may be. All right. So often, as a symptom, cramps as a symptom, people will go for magnesium, but it may actually not be magnesium. You might be, compounding the problem of having too much magnesium, causing an imbalance of calcium, because magnesium and calcium are antagonists. They also work together, but they need to work in a really, really key ratio. And if they're out of whack, it could be causing problems down the track. All right. Okay, so holistic strategies. First step, to find out what's actually going on in your body. All right. So if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, and you'd like to find out more about what's actually going on in your body, and have a snapshot of, whether you've got heavy metals, whether you've got mineral insufficiencies or deficiencies, whether your ratios are out of whack, and imbalanced, which is actually causing problems with your metabolic health. And you may or may not have a thyroid challenge. You most likely have symptoms of thyroid challenge if you're in this group. I would love you to type, love you to type testing. All right. So whether you're watching this on the replay or watching this tonight, just type testing, because what I can do is we can actually chat to you privately to get a clearer understanding of what's actually going on for you, your signs and symptoms, or, whether it's just something that's just come out of the woods and the woodwork, and suddenly you've been told you've got osteopenia or osteoporosis. Just type testing, and I can have a discussion with you to see whether this level of testing, which I believe it would be, will be absolutely key and crucial for you, so that you can then have a clear understanding of what's actually going on in your body to address the root cause, as opposed to just supplementing because you were told to supplement. All right. That goes for vitamin D as well. We don't want too much vitamin D either. All right. So we only want minerals if our body is requiring those minerals. All right. And naturopathy, where I work in natural health, it's all about addressing the root cause. Yeah. It may be a complex picture, and it may require several levels of understanding before we can really get to the bottom of what's going on with your health. But I'm telling you now, it's absolutely worth it, because what else are you going to do? You can only play guesswork with your health for so long. And depending on how chronic the health issue is, will depend on, often, not always, actually probably 50% of the time with what clients that I've actually worked with, that depending on how chronic the health issue is will depend on how many rabbit holes we need to dive down to actually get to the root cause, right? Not always though. Sometimes it's relatively quick. It just depends. We're all very different. And it's about really respecting you as a unique individual that you are and with what's actually going on for you so that we can actually get to the bottom of it. It's really, really important because that's what we're here for, right? We're here to live our best life. We're here to be of service to whatever it is, whatever your soul's calling is. We're here. We all play a role. We all play a part on this planet. And my role is to actually help you feel the very, very best that you can feel in your body, and to prevent chronic disease. So if that's something that resonates and you would like to get to the bottom of your health picture and what's going on, whether it's to do with bone health specifically or whether it's some other niggling issue, it could be a digestive issue, it could be that you've had this chronic fatigue or you keep getting viruses and keep getting sick, whatever it is, there's generally a link to your metabolism. There's generally a link somewhere to your adrenals, thyroid, endocrine system, because these are our hormonal chemical messengers that are trying to keep us in balance at all times. So if that's you and if you'd really like to get to the bottom of what's actually going on for you, I'd love you to type in the comments root cause. And again, I can actually reach out to you and we can actually see what have you done so far? What have your obstacles been and what are the biggest challenges and hurdles that you face? And then from that information, I'll be able to create a pathway for you and a plan. So, with a plan, then you can actually piece it together and go, okay, well, this is the first step. All right, so now that's done. This is the second step. Just to really break it down. Break it down so that it's not so overwhelming. And then gradually, as we find those missing pieces to the puzzle and bring cohesion back to your body, get the minerals in balance, remove whatever it is that's sabotaging your health, whether it be heavy metals, whether it be a parasite, whatever it is that's going on for you, well, then you'll start to feel and see the difference with your health and gain confidence. And the other element, so obviously I've spoken about functional testing, and I'm not going to go into this too much, but the other element that I really draw in to every single, with every single client that I work with is to work with you in partnership. Because I truly believe that the wisdom that your body holds is very, very important to listen to. All right? Because we all have an innate amount of intelligence within our body, which holds very, very crucial and important messages. All right, so there's one thing, we've got functional testing, we've got evidence-based medicine, we've got a detective, I'm a detective, and then we've got you really listening in and tuning in to your health picture with what's going on. And of course, we've got all the biomedical tests as well, such as bone mineral density, all right, DEXA scan and things like that. So with all of that, we get to work and we piece it together so that in 3 months' time, in 4 months' time, in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, we can't really put a time frame on health. We can't really put a time frame on, how long it's going to take for you to actually, for your body to actually understand what's going on and bring that balance back. But we can provide benchmarks so that within this time frame, we're going to have a really clear understanding and a much clearer understanding than what we did at the very beginning. All right. And then we correlate all of that with, what you've done so far, what you understand about your health so far. Has there been an extreme chronic amount of stress? Well, if there has, that's potentially going to tell me that there's some mineral imbalances in your body because your body's been trying to work without a strong backbone. All right. Has there been a chronic gut infection or inflammation that you're kind of just been dealing with, but you haven't really got to the bottom of it. Well, that's going to impact your body's ability to absorb key nutrients and minerals. Right now, the list goes on. So I'm just going to keep it to the topic at hand, which is thyroid impact on bone health. So if you'd like more information on this as well, please type bone health, because that will tell me that you're interested and you'd like more information. And I can do things like I can write a blog. Blogs, I get there in the end. But or we can have a conversation and I can actually discuss your individual case that's specific to you with what's going on for you. All right, well, I hope you found this interesting, and I look forward to seeing you next week. We've already got the live training up for next week, which is going to be all about vaccines and the impact of COVID-19 vaccines on the endocrine system in general, the immune system in general, and a lot of chronic diseases. So if you're interested in that, tune in next week, and I look forward to seeing you there. All right, bye for now.